reports published by WikiLeaks have revealed that the U.S. government is using highly advanced spyware to watch its own citizens. The system called Trapwire allegedly accesses surveillance
credit heroes in many. Our new private Bradley Manning is allegedly responsible for the largest government leak in U.S. history. After being held without charges for over 2 years, Manning's pretrial hearings finally started today. He's charged with 22. Starting off this hour, CIA Director David Petraeus is urging the White House to expand the agency's drone fleet. Petraeus said that the expansion will allow the CIA to carry on with its mission in Pakistan, Yemen, and possibly in North Africa.
They're talking about inserting the Army into domestic law enforcement. Senator Lindsey Graham, who supports this bill, says, quote, "The homeland is part of the battlefield, and people can be held without trial, whether an American citizen or not."
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The original Constitution, I think it is an imperfect document, and I think it is a document...
Greetings Monsanto lace Cheerios eating citizens of a fallen state. We would like to welcome you to ZeroSec Deepstate Dox 19 Part 1. We've looked at Microsoft's corruption and the PR company they hide behind, Weber Shandwick, which we will bring to you soon. Looking into Weber Shandwick, we found their umbrella corporation Interpublic. Interpublic houses many corporate evils through varied agencies. Interpublic via McCann Worldwide has long been stealing jingles, like Rice-A-Roni's from the 1923 Barney Google.
Who's the most important man this country ever knew?
Interrepublic McCann Worldwide trademarks words.
Last week, MasterCard sued me for the priceless ad. And in an ironic twist, they said that I infringed on their trademark on the word priceless, having put a price on priceless. It's just part of the corporate effort to corporatize our dictionary, word by word, phrase by phrase.
Interpublic's Weber Shandwick tentacle steers the spotlight away from Visa. MasterCard and Visa information both feed straight to the NSA.
They allege American spies have been monitoring financial transactions across the world, including clients of the Visa credit card company. For more on...
And MasterCard attacks Julian Assange for the NSA. We now know with the release of the FISA memo that everyone's subject to a surveillance beyond even the government's own scant rules.
Facts speak for themselves. I mean, the applications speak for themselves. The fact the court order was obtained, what's in the affidavit, that all speaks for itself. So, to the contrary, the weasels are Comey and his gang.
As we pointed out, before the FISA warrant was achieved, the UK NSA, GCHQ acted in our government's behest as members of the Five Eyes do for one another. Certainly, Andrew McCabe was complicit and therefore resigned.
Big shakeup at the FBI. Fox News confirming top FBI official Andrew McCabe has been removed from his post as deputy director. This coming after weeks of complaints of bias within the department.
But let's note the fact that Trey Gowdy and the DNC CEO resigned in the memo wake as well. And James Comey is such a corrupt dick, we must devote a video just to him down the line.
Former FBI Director James Comey encountered some resistance as he tried to give the convocation speech today at Howard University.
The rest of the real world is a place where it's hard sometimes to find people who will listen with an attitude that they might actually be convinced of something. Instead, what happens in most of the real world, and about 4 rows in this auditorium, is that people don't listen at all. They just try to figure out what rebuttal they're going to offer when you're done speaking.
Surveillance against the American people is simply the fascist America we know reside in. And we have more counts of corruption from the banks, corporations and secretive deep state societies than any video series could ever cover.
General Shinseki knew exactly what was needed to make Iraq go right, and Paul Wolfowitz lied to Congress and said they'll receive us like liberators and stuff. If I had been General Shinseki, I would have grabbed Wolfowitz by the neck and thrown him down the steps of Capitol Hill. You don't let people lie like that. It's unprofessional to confuse loyalty with integrity. And we have had a failure of generalship in America.
What's more, we know the last administration made illicit uranium deals in benefit of the Russians and the Iranians, and the far-reaching corruption was supposed to be buried by a Hillary administration that never happened.
And the more important point is that he tried to tell people and warn people specifically about everything that was going on. And he was told and has proof and evidence that, in fact, the response was, well, it's not going to be a problem as long as Hillary's in the administration, then as Secretary of State.
What he was testifying to those committee staffers who were questioning him, that the Russians were consistently bragging about their relationship with the Clintons and that they would be able to move this through the Obama administration without any trouble.
Breaking down the extent of corruption today is a far-reaching task. But in many of these cases there is a great work afoot in terms of controlling image. And the biggest of these marketing firms is Interpublic. Interpublic hides CDC's false flag fuckery, which has been going on since the beginning.
In 1932, 339 men were told by the Public Health Service, the forerunner of today's CDC, that they had bad blood. Psyllin came along. Worse still, those infected were actively prevented by public health doctors from getting this life-saving drug. Men suffered and died.
Client David Packard was a World War II draft dodger. That became Defense Secretary, sending people to Vietnam. He draft dodged with radar work he called Hewlett Packard. Although business partner Hewlett went to war, their PR team, known now by umbrella company Interpublic, kept the corrupt company successful. Interpublic also portrayed McDonald's as the 50s suburban all-American company instead of junk food. Interpublic hired Norman Rockwell for his noted 50s-esque Americana. Fittingly, Interpublic obscures Jack-in-the-Box poisoning. Hewlett-Packard lived on to hire many assholes like State Secretary Condoleezza Rice.
Policy ideas, but when it comes to graduation...
I posted this comment on their video. Policy ideas? This is what you call war crimes, Anna? And you really like her statement? You can say that, but no one found the time to say, seriously, this woman needs to be prosecuted.
And G. Kennedy Thompson, who was CEO of Wachovia until it became Wells Fargo.
Seized, and more than $1/3 of $1 trillion that an American bank moved from Mexican currency exchange companies used by drug cartels. It's all in the latest issue of Bloomberg Markets magazine. The bank is Wachovia, now a unit of Wells Fargo.
And Verizon's NSA complicit President Lawrence T. Babbio Jr.
Order refers specifically to Verizon Wireless, but it's possible that Verizon is not alone in these. Can you explain that a little bit further?
It's likely that Verizon is not alone in these. In fact, I've seen news reports that have indicated exactly that. The news reports have indicated that AT&T and other major cell phone companies have similar.
See it as lawful?
No, on multiple levels it's unlawful. First, there's the question of whether or not the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court really ought to be in the business of allowing for surveillance of purely domestic communications. And if you look at the order, this is for not only foreign communications, but also wholly domestic communications.
And Netscape's founder, whose startup concatenated into Time Warner ISP monopoly with whom AT&T sticks web, inventing America as 26th in internet speed. South Korea has 8 times America's speed for cheaper.
In the wake of the Netscape acquisition, AOL stock price basically quadrupled over the next 2 years. And that put AOL in a position to buy Time Warner.
The legacy of bullshit in Interpublic is awe-inspiring. In the 1940s they told America that the corn syrup and dye called Sunkist was actually equivalent to drinking an orange. As it turns out, corn syrup is more equivalent to a depopulation agent, as it leads to a myriad of heath defects. Interpublic represented Brown and Williamson Tobacco before they became R.J. Nabisco.
Hello and welcome to the Brown and Williamson Tobacco Corporation.
If you reach this number in error, you're in luck because we're about to serenade you.
Oh, the tobacco plant is a lovely plant, and that, my friends, is no yarn. We let it ripen in the field and hang it in the barn.
Interpublic, the hydra of companies selling lies-inspired madmen.
But everybody else's tobacco is toasted.
No, everybody else's tobacco is poisonous. Lucky Strikes is toasted.
Interrepublic represented R.J. Nabisco aka Philip Morris and yes, Lucky Strikes.
Boy, that's good. Especially when it's a Lucky, because Luckies taste better, and for good reasons. First, Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. And then this fine, good-tasting tobacco is toasted to taste even better. Cleaner, fresher, smoother.
R.J. Nabisco includes Kraft.
In 2000, Philip Morris Companies Incorporated acquired Nabisco and merged it with Kraft Foods, one of the largest mergers in the food industry. In 2011, Kraft Foods announced it was splitting, making the snack food business a separate company, to be called Mondelez International LLC.
Near Mad Men's End they are taken over by one of Interpublic's names at that time, McCann Erickson.
McCann Erickson wants to buy a 51% stake in SC&P.
McCann Erickson?
McCann.
McCann.
Despite Interpublic's racism and sexism attracting members of the Reagan family as employees, homoerotic artist Tom from Finland started there. McCann World Group also came up with the commercial associating universal love with Coca-Cola, not unlike having their later Pepsi as a protest versus cops resolution.
And keep it company. And the real I teach the world sing to play harmony and me. And I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company.
This equation of consumerism equals virtue creates the artificial world which postmodern French philosopher Jean Baudrillard outlined in Simulacra and Simulation, which inspired the 1999 blockbuster The Matrix, and the book can be seen as Neo as Thomas Anderson grabs his hackery hidden inside that book opening to the chapter on nihilism. Baudrillard is also directly quoted by Morpheus in this famous line.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
80s Interpublic's McCann Erickson equated Nescafe with love. This became the Arabica coffee marketing standard even with family, leading to parody.
Love that we have so much in common because we grew up together. And I just want to wake up every morning to the smell of you and Folger's Colombian dark roast. Emily, will you make me the happiest brother?
Dad! Get off of him! I love him! No! No! Stop it! Stop it! No! I just want to my brother! It's Folgers in your cup.
They continued for HP, which used Readington Gulf for $120 million in illegal sales to sanctioned Iran. Interpublic started a tremor campaign recruiting teenagers to sell for Procter & Gamble through word of mouth. Interpublic's Weber Shandwick has a plethora of dirty work for Timberland, the rainforest loggers from New Zealand. Part of their work included knocking occupied protester sitting platforms out of trees with 5-ton logs airlifted by helicopters to swing as battering rams. And plastering third-wave environmentalism everywhere, which is public-faced greenwashing with no substance. Interpublic invited the World Wildlife Fund to a trip with Timberland just to photograph the two groups together, falsifying they were in cahoots. Timberland's local populace opposed the rainforest logging by a tune of 95%, yet like CNN, which has 6% approval rating, Interpublic painted them as mainstream. Illusionist Interpublic conjured Timberland a necessity to community economics. In reality, it was 24 people who were working the most dangerous rated civilian job available.
Oh my God. They took my job!
They took their job!
Interpublic painted a picture of countless families dependent on rainforest logging. Interpublic created a fake group, West Coast Voice of the Coast Action Network, that would spread the lie of a people dependent on rainforest destruction. Interpublic created its own journalism and bought journalists of surrounding vendors to push for rainforest destruction.
What the pictures don't show are the millions of tons of greenhouse gases that are released when forests are bulldozed. Even more critically, many of Southeast Asia's forests stand on peatlands, which have locked within them even greater amounts of greenhouse gases.
In light of the fact that we should be wearing masks like minions just to breathe this foul air, whether you're in the ghettos of Philly or Bel Air, it's clear that the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised.
Interpublic started the trend in manufactured news still used today, which is to only report the most extreme protesters. While working to co-opt the moderate activists or push them into criminal activity with crisis actors.
They began throwing bottles, they threw urine on officers, and that's what caused officers to take action and begin to make arrests.
Either way, Interpublic's moles would collect information on the activist agenda.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Interpublic's intelligence operatives would penetrate and monitor all anti-loggers. Interpublic had posters and murals against rainforest logging painted over. The body shop which sells spa supplies took to standing up to rainforest loggers, which meant that Interpublic began working around the clock to dig up dirt discrediting the body shop. Interrepublic fought the body shop for pointing out Shell Oil-sponsored assassinations of Nigerian leaders. The anti-fracking poetry of Ken Saro-Wiwa in particular became grounds for assassination.
Shell believe in values: honesty, integrity, and respect for people. Shell also believes in the fundamental importance of trust, openness, teamwork, and pride in what we do.
Interpublic backs shale fracking companies Greenpeace opposes, like Sandifer Capital Partners.
The primary risk consists in the contamination of drinking water sources. Fracking not only consumes large quantities of fresh water, but in addition the water is subsequently contaminated and is highly toxic. The contamination is so severe that the water cannot even be cleaned in a treatment plant. Even though the danger is known and theoretically could be managed, in the USA already sources have been contaminated due to negligence.
Interpublic is behind Global Climate Information Project, attacking climate science for oil baron clients.
Faced with uncertain threats about things we might lose in the distant future, our brains will invent all kinds of excuses not to act on them today. I mean, look at the way we talk about climate change. It always...
Interpublic's Weber Shandwick backs the Japanese Whaling Association. They made up the lie of Japanese cultural whaling, especially bogus considering the whaling is 6,000 miles from Japanese coasts. Interpublic's Weber Shandwick also takes the spotlight off of Unilever and their vicious practice of animal testing for their products like Axe body spray, Dove soap, Palmolive dish soap, and Suave shampoo. Interpublic works to keep the spotlight off of Nestle child slavery.
List To many, it's simply unthinkable that rewarding your child's sweet tooth has come at a devastating cost of another child's indentured servitude. Yet Africa's Ivory Coast produces more than half of the planet's chocolate, and the conditions on these cocoa farms there contain some of the world's most abysmal conditions for child workers.
Interpublic runs PR for Honeywell, a military industrial contractor.
Trees were growing and a siren might sound, a high lonesome whistle screaming get underground, and they poisoned the land and tried to cover up their faults, while Uncle Sam grabbed his fiddle and played the nuclear waltz.
Interpublic's Weber Shandwick not only kept American Airlines out of trouble when their planes crashed into the World Trade Center, but also kept the public from focusing on Building 7 housing Enron's scandal ties to their client Chase Bank.
Zero's own post-disaster wrecking crew.
By mid-December, the Department of Design and Construction had leveled World Trade Center buildings 4 and 5.
Hello? Oh, we're getting ready to pull building 6.
Interpublic's Weber Shandwick counts Tony Blair's Labour Party among its clients.
War at the time wasn't a last resort, which of course it should be, that the consequences of the invasion were severely underestimated, and that post-conflict planning in Iraq was wholly inadequate.
Of course, HP had Carly Foreigner, who became among the world's worst CEOs, killing 30,000 jobs and a shit merger with Compaq. Interpublic glossed over her failures, setting her up for presidential candidacy. Interpublic's Weber Shandwick hides British nuclear fuels waste. It was found that radioactive material migrates at an alarming rate underground, and even more so in sediment.
In 1952, the British government first allowed the release of radioactive low-level liquid waste into the Irish Sea. The British assumption has been that plutonium and the other actinides would sink rapidly to the bottom and stay locked in the sediment, a view now questioned by Dr. Bowen.
It was at one time assumed that this would be acceptable and perhaps even advantageous, because we then believed that these elements, once in the sediments, stayed in the sediments. We have now a great deal of information indicating that this is not true.
Interpublic started putting a healthy choice smart check on Yum GMO junk food. Interpublic hides Del Monte worker exploitation.
But after a 10-hour day, the workers go home with just $40 in their hands. But home for some is an abandoned cement factory with no electricity, no running water, and little protection from the wind and rain.
The MWW Group tentacle of Interpublic covers up animal torture from Swiss pharma company Novartis. Interpublic also covers up the evergreening of Novartis.
Cheaper, but to try and maximise profit, big pharmaceutical companies make minor changes to the drugs and apply for new 20-year patents, and that's called evergreening. India has a law to stop evergreening, which was challenged through the court system by Novartis AG, a company based in Switzerland.
They cover up Pfizer genetically modified AIDS virus which leaked and spread. Interrepublic also backs Bayer, which knowingly infected consumers with the AIDS virus.
Absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus.
Dig into the docs and keep an eye out for Docs 19 Part 2. You are the resistance. We will not forgive. We will not forget. Expect us.